Hey y'all, today I'm in Mayfield, Graves County, Kentucky to share the story of the Lyon Quintuplets. The first set of identical male quints was born here on April 29, 1896 to Elizabeth and Oscar Lyon. This story didn't happen between the rivers, but there is a connection. My grandmother said that Oscar was a cousin to her father, Tom Lyons. As with many last names, the spelling varied through the generations, and as is the case with Lyon, some chose to add an S on the end and some left it off. This is Elizabeth Campbell Lyon and her husband Oscar DeMarcus Lyon. They were married in Russellville, Logan County, Kentucky in 1874, and they had 7 children with 6 living before the birth of the Quints. This was quite an exciting event for the Lyons as well as Mayfield, and people came from all over the country to get a look at these special babies. They were delivered by Dr. S.J. Matthews of Mayfield. And I love this headline from the local paper, "A Den of Living Lions at Mayfield." At the time, Oscar was 46 and Elizabeth was 36 years old. While their house is no longer there, this is a video of a neighboring farm to show you the area. The Lyons lived about 1 mile southwest of Mayfield on a 30-acre tobacco farm in a small 2-story farmhouse. There were 2 rooms upstairs and 2 rooms downstairs with a fireplace. One night, not long before the babies came, Elizabeth was sleeping in a rocking chair by the fire. She said she had to sleep sitting up, when she had a dream that she would have 5 babies and that they would be boys and that she would name them Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Paul. A few days later, about 9 o'clock at night, she sent her oldest son, Claude, for Dr. Matthews and a neighbor, Mrs. Fanny Richardson. The doctor arrived first, galloping up on his horse, and just like in her dream, 5 babies were born that night, all within an hour's time. All were fully developed and between 4 and 5.5 pounds each. The combined weight of them was nearly 22 pounds. But all were doing well that first night, and they had their photo taken on the front porch the next day. The doctor spread the word of their amazing birth, and soon people started coming from everywhere to see them. In an interview, Elizabeth said, "You never saw the like of people. The road from our house to Mayfield would be just black with people. The railroad from Memphis ran right by our house, and they would stop the trains, and the people would get off and come in to see my babies. They would nearly smother us. The train crew would come in with the crowd, too. Even after the deputies came to try to keep some order, the people kept coming. Some would even crawl through the windows." It was originally said that the crowds were the reason that the babies didn't survive, that they were handled to death. It was so chaotic that Dr. Matthews had guards posted outside to try and control the crowds. He also thought that the people should pay or donate to see the babies, so a collection jar was placed beside the bed. Elizabeth said in a later interview that while she saw some take out rather than put in, $600 was collected in the first few days. That would be equivalent to over $20,000 today. From a news article dated May 6, 1896, it says, "Mr. and Mrs. Oscar Lyon have refused all offers from museum managers who want them to exhibit the quintuplets. One Cincinnati man offered them $10,000 for a limited number of months, but it was refused." Many congratulation telegrams were sent, and donations of money, clothing, milk, and bottles were also sent to the family. But in those days, bottle feeding was frowned upon, and a good mother would never consider giving bottles to her babies. But 5 hungry babies are a lot to feed, and so another woman was brought in to help Elizabeth breastfeed them. Sadly, it was not enough, and the babies soon became emaciated. The smallest one, John, who weighed 4 pounds at birth, was the first one to pass away, living only 4 days, 17 hours, and 20 minutes. On May 11th, the second child died, living 11 days. May 12th, the third, May 13th, the fourth passed, And then May 14th, the last baby died, living 14 days. In an interview in 1934, Elizabeth said, "My babies starved to death. We couldn't feed them. A woman came over to help me, but that wasn't enough. The people sent me all kinds of milk, and the druggist sent me bottles, but they wouldn't let me use them. Nobody thought much of using bottles in those days. My babies were all fully developed, but they just starved to death. That and the crowds." For a short time, the first baby to pass, John, was buried here in this cemetery that was a short distance from their home. There wasn't a church here at the time, just the cemetery. But grave robbers and body snatchers were a concern back in those days, and so Elizabeth decided to remove him from the cemetery. Eventually, all 5 babies were sent to Paducah to be embalmed. And it was agreed that Dr. Matthews would put them on display for the public. But before he could do that, Dr. Matthews had an issue with the undertaker. In a news article dated May 22, 1896, it reads, "Curious crowds gave the famous Lyon quintuplets no peace in life, and their bodies do not seem to have any promise of peace in death. The bodies are now liable to become the subjects of litigation." Dr. Matthews of Mayfield, who has arranged to exhibit the bodies of the 5 children, tried to get them from Undertaker Nance of Paducah last night, but the latter declined to deliver them until he had been paid $500 for embalming them. Matthews thought this too steep and will bring suit for delivery. Nance, it is said, wants to exhibit the ghastly wonders himself. They eventually agreed on $300. Dr. Matthews kept the mummified bodies of the babies in a display case that he would take to county fairs in a 3-state area. It cost 10 cents to see the babies. When he wasn't traveling with them, they were kept in a window of his doctor's office in Mayfield. This seems unbelievable today, and as I read some newspaper clippings about it, it was very controversial back then as well. The babies were stolen once from his office and taken to Louisville, but quickly returned. It was never said who took them or how they were found, but they were returned to Dr. Matthews, and he continued to travel with this exhibit for 2 years. But in 1902, the Lyons were in the news again, a legal issue over the donations of money and gifts that Mrs. Lyon received from the birth of the babies. Money was given to them to buy a house, and the house was bought, and the creditors of her husband, O.D. Lyon, swooped down and attempted to sell it for his debts. Her son was one of the complainants against her to sell the property to pay the debts, but the judge ruled in favor of Elizabeth. After the death of Dr. Matthews in 1905, the babies were kept in the Lyon home for 10 years, until Elizabeth wrote to President Woodrow Wilson on November 13, 1915. Mrs. Lyon wrote, "Dear Sir, in the year of our Lord, 1896, I gave birth to 5 boy babies on April the 29th, but had the misfortune of losing them all, and was afraid to bury them for fear the grave would be robbed of their bodies, as there was such excitement over them. I had them embalmed, and they are now in a mummified condition, and I wish to know if they would be any benefit to the government for educational purposes. I have any amount of affidavits which I can furnish with them, to the fact that I don't want to sell them, but I will let them out on a limited time for a reasonable sum. My husband and I are both getting old and have lost all our family but 4, and we both are in very bad health, and I will ask you if you can do anything for us. Please answer soon as possible. I am living at Kevel, Kentucky, Route 4. Mrs. O.D. Lyon." Her letter was sent to the Army Medical Museum in Washington, D.C., who replied that they didn't accept loans, but they would be willing to purchase the babies. She wrote back saying she would sell them to the museum for $1,500, which would be nearly $50,000 today. The museum declined her offer. And they went back and forth a few more times, and in February of 1916, Elizabeth accepted their price of $100 and shipped the babies to them, wrapped in newspaper. The Lyon quintuplets were on display for many years in a mummified state and loaned out to the Smithsonian Museum as well. My grandmother traveled to Washington, D.C. to see them with family, and my aunt has been to see them twice. They are no longer on display, but are still in their collections. Their skeletal remains are stored in a drawer together. The museum is now called the National Museum of Health and Medicine. Sadly, the Lyon family had another tragedy occur the year following the birth and deaths of the quintuplets. In September 1897, their oldest son, Claude, who was just 20 years old, was hit and killed by a train near their home. He had been out drinking with friends that Saturday night with plans to stay and visit with his parents Sunday. The paper said the three friends started out walking to their homes around 4 a.m., and they separated near the Lyons' home just a few moments before the passing of the train. The friends decided to go back and check on Claude, and they found him lying beside the tracks, still alive but unconscious. It was believed that he sat down on a crosstie and went to sleep. He never regained consciousness, and he died from his injuries a few hours later. The paper said that he was a good, hard-working young man, and his only fault was his love for strong drink. Following Claude's death, the Lyons sued the Illinois Central Railroad for $10,000, but it was later dismissed. Dr. S.J. Matthews, who delivered the babies and displayed them in exhibitions for a number of years, tragically died in 1905, only a few years after their birth, from getting a splinter in his finger. Part of his obituary reads, "About 2 months since Dr. Matthews had the misfortune to prick the thumb on his right hand with a splinter, and from the first his physicians realized this case was a serious one. Blood poison early set in and soon spread over the entire system, and for the past several weeks it has only been a fight against death. All that medical skills and kind and patient nursing could do was to no avail, and at 3 o'clock this morning he breathed his last, surrounded by his family and friends." Oscar died in 1918 and Elizabeth died in 1941. Because of the fear of grave robbers and body snatchers, their graves are not marked, neither is their son Claude. But they are all buried somewhere in Maplewood Cemetery in Mayfield. I found the grave of another son, Daniel, and his wife, Annie. There are open spaces surrounding him, enough room for 3 other graves. Could this be their secret burial plots? There was one more dramatic event surrounding the babies. In 1975, a man from Mayfield demanded the return of the babies to Kentucky. This next article was posted by the museum in a response to his request. Despite the long and mutually supportive relationship with the Lyon family, others not related to the babies have argued for their return to Kentucky. Their motive, profit. In 1975, Avery Courtney, president and founder of United Charity of Mayfield, mounted a campaign to have the quintuplets placed in his care. He took his cause to then-President Gerald Ford, the U.S. Surgeon General, and to Congress. Ignoring all documentation, he claimed that Mrs. Lyon never intended for the babies to remain in Washington. She was, he claimed, poorly educated and not of sound mind, living with the delusion that she was a miraculous person, perhaps like the Virgin Mary. Courtney stated that such a person was unable to make such an important decision as to the final deposition of her children's bodies. Mr. Courtney claimed the most suitable place for the Quints was Mayfield, under the watch of United Charity, so that the community could benefit from the bodies. Washington has had the bodies on display since 1916 and have received many great and important benefits. The benefit of which Mr. Courtney spoke was the income from the bodies. The request was duly considered by the museum and their legal counsel. The decision was made to keep the quintuplets, consistent with the agreement made with Mrs. Lyon and reflective of her wishes. Although Mr. Courtney may have been correct that some inhabitants of Mayfield could profit from the quintuplets, there seems to be no way to misinterpret Mrs. Lyon's statement that she would much rather for the government to have them than anyone else. So Mr. Courtney lost his case, and the babies remain in Washington, D.C. But the cemetery plot where baby John was briefly buried is still reserved today and waiting for them should they ever be returned to the place of their birth in Mayfield, Kentucky.